Admiral Mitchell had never fully trusted Olivia. She was young, efficient, and a woman in a space he believed belonged only to seasoned men. That alone made him suspicious. To test her, he pretended to fall asleep at his desk, slowing his breathing, letting his body go still. The office was silent except for the low hum of electronics. That was when Olivia moved. Calmly, precisely, she approached his laptop and began navigating through secured folders. Mitchell, watching through half-closed eyes, felt his chest tighten. She wasn't guessing passwords, she wasn't hesitating. She was accessing classified systems reserved for the highest clearance levels. In that moment, a cold realization settled in. No ordinary assistant could do what he was witnessing. His pulse spiked as fear replaced arrogance. Mitchell understood instantly that Olivia was not who she claimed to be, and worse, that his life was no longer under his control. One wrong move, one breath taken too sharply, and he might not leave that office alive. The balance of power had shifted without a single word spoken. Who was Olivia really? Who had sent her? And how deep did this go? But before we proceed, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Now let's understand how this story really began. Rear Admiral Marcus Mitchell sat alone in his office, Naval Special Warfare Command. The overhead lights dimmed to a deliberate half-glow. It was a space designed to intimidate. Dark wood paneling, frame commendations, a flat position at a precise angle behind his desk. He adjusted the collar of his dress uniform with 2 fingers, a habitual gesture when irritation crept in. The fabric felt tighter than usual around his neck. Across the room, Olivia moved quietly among the filing cabinets. She did not hum, she did not scroll on her phone. She did not ask questions that, more than anything, annoyed him. Mitchell watched her from behind his desk, his gaze sharp, appraising. She was young, too young. Her posture was polite, contained, almost deferential. To his mind, she checked all the boxes of a modern administrative placement, competent on paper, unremarkable in presence. A diversity hire, he decided within minutes of their first meeting. Someone assigned to him, not earned, and therefore disposable. He leaned back in his chair, letting the leather creak, then allowed his shoulders to slacken. His breathing slowed deliberately, each inhale measured, each exhale extended. Years of command had taught him how to regulate his body on demand. His eyelids lower until only a thin slit of vision remained. Sleep was a performance, one he executed flawlessly. He waited. He expected the telltale signs: fabric rustling as she checked her phone, the soft scrape of a drawer being tested, the faint impatience of someone who believed authority had gone unconscious. He wanted cause, a justification clean enough for HR, small enough to be ignored by command. The office fell unnaturally quiet. In the reflection of his darkened monitor, Mitchell saw Olivia turn. It was not abrupt, it was economical. The subtle droop in her shoulders vanished. Her spine aligned, vertebra by vertebra, as if an invisible string had drawn her upward. Her feet repositioned soundlessly, weight balanced over the balls, not the heels. The change was so precise it triggered something instinctive in him, a tightening low in the gut he had not felt since active deployments. She moved toward his desk, not walking, gliding. Her steps made no sound against the hardwood. She stopped just outside arm's reach, her shadow falling across his blotter. Mitchell felt the faintest curl of satisfaction inside his chest. There it is, he thought. Caught, but Olivia did not reach for the drawers. Her hand went to the military-grade laptop docked at the corner of the desk, Cybernet secured, biometric access. Classified compartmented information. Mitchell's pulse jumped, once, hard. He prepared to spring upright, to bark an order that would freeze her in place. Then she produced a slim black drive from the inside of her sleeve. Not a pocket, a sleeve. The insertion was smooth, practiced. Her fingers moved across the keyboard in rapid, precise bursts. Command line inputs, not passwords. Mitchell recognized the cadence despite himself. This was not guessing, this was execution. Lines of code cascaded down the screen, reflected faintly in the polished surface of his desk. A file directory opened, Operation Black Tie. Mitchell's breath caught halfway through an inhale. The air stalled in his lungs, shallow and burning. That operation did not exist on paper. It was compartmentalized beyond standard clearance, buried beneath layers of obfuscation only a handful of individuals at the Pentagon even knew how to access. Olivia's eyes moved left to right, absorbing data with unsettling speed. No hesitation, no visible reaction. Her face was neutral, controlled, almost empty, like someone reading a grocery list, not evidence of illicit fund transfers and buried casualty reports. A muscle jumped in Mitchell's jaw. She lifted her gaze. For a fraction of a second, her eyes locked onto his face, direct, assessing, as if she knew exactly how awake he was. The smirk he had been cultivating died before it could form. In that moment, stretched thin and silent, Marcus Mitchell understood something with chilling clarity. The office was no longer his terrain. The test had inverted. Whatever he thought he was hunting had already closed the distance, and it was watching him pretend to sleep. Mitchell's heart struck his ribcage with a dull, panicked force, each beat slightly out of rhythm, like a misfiring engine. He kept his chest moving in slow, even rises, counting the seconds between breaths the way he had once counted steps on patrol. Any deviation now, any twitch too sharp, any breath too deep would give him away. If he moved, and she was what his instincts were screaming she was, this would not end with a reprimand or an inquiry. It would end quietly, permanently. Inside his own office, Olivia's fingers withdrew the drive with the same precision she had used to insert it. No haste, no flourish. She paused just long enough to wipe the keyboard and the edge of the desk with a gray microfiber cloth she produced from somewhere beneath her sleeve. The motion was clinical, methodical, erasing oils, prints, trace fibers. Mitchell recognized the technique despite himself, counterforensics, the kind taught to people who were never meant to be caught. She returned the cloth to its hiding place and stepped back. Her shoulders softened, her spine curved. The efficient stillness collapsed into something smaller, almost fragile. When she turned toward her desk, her gait shortened, her feet landing flat instead of balanced. It was as if a switch had been flipped behind her eyes. Mitchell forced a shallow snort through his nose and let his eyelids flutter open. He blinked twice, slow, deliberately unfocused, and straightened with a faint groan, rolling his neck as if stiff from sleep. Olivia was already beside him, holding a porcelain cup. "Good afternoon, Admiral," she said. Her voice wavered just enough to suggest nervousness. Not fear and certainty, a junior employee addressing power. Her fingers trembled slightly as she extended the coffee, a calculated imperfection. The scent of fresh brew reached him, sharp and grounding. Mitchell stared at her. He searched her face for the woman who had stood over him seconds earlier, ice cold, posture lethal. He found nothing. Her expression was open, almost apologetic. Large brown eyes blinked up at him, lashes casting soft shadows against her cheeks. Her mouth was neutral, corners faintly downturned, as if bracing for criticism. His throat constricted. "Thank you, Olivia," he managed, the words scraping out rougher than intended. He took the cup. His hand shook despite his effort to still it, the porcelain clinking softly against the saucer. She nodded once and returned to her desk. Mitchell did not drink the coffee. He waited, counted. When she finally excused herself for lunch, her voice polite, her movements unremarkable, he locked the door the instant it closed behind her. He lunged for the laptop. His fingers flew, bypassing menus, opening system diagnostics, audit trails, access histories. His eyes darted across the screen, pupils narrowing as lines of data populated. He checked timestamps, user IDs, biometric confirmation logs. Nothing, no anomaly, no breach, no ghost logging. The system showed exactly what it should have shown if no one had touched it at all. A bead of sweat rolled from his hairline down his temple, tracing the edge of his ear before disappearing beneath his collar. His jaw tightened until it ached. He ran the skin again, deeper this time, invoking redundancies most users didn't know existed. Still nothing. It was wrong. He knew it with a certainty that settled heavy in his gut. To defeat multi-factor biometric security and sanitize the logs in under a minute was not the work of a hobbyist or a thief. It required infrastructure-level knowledge, state-level capability, NSA, or worse, JSOC. His left eye twitched, once, sharply. He reached for the secure phone on his desk, thumb hovering just above the encrypted line to base security. Protocol demanded he report a suspected breach immediately. But his hand froze. If he called it in, she would know he had seen something. If she had accessed black tide and the empty logs told him she had, then she possessed evidence that could end him. Not just professionally, Criminally, he could not fire her. He could not move against her openly. He had to keep her where he could see her. The phone rang before he could decide. Mitchell flinched, the sound slicing through the office like a blade. He cleared his throat and answered, forcing his voice into regulation calm. "Mitchell," he said. The general's voice came through the line, clipped, controlled. "We have a problem with the budget allocation. An inconsistency was flagged during review." Mitchell's grip tightened around the phone until his knuckles whitened. "Yes, sir," he replied automatically. His eyes drifted to the closed office door. The wood looked thicker than it had a moment ago. He imagined her on the other side of it, walking away, unhurried. The inconsistency had surfaced faster than it should have. The machine had noticed the ghost. It had begun. The next 3 days unfolded like a controlled burn that never quite went out. Mitchell moved through his routines with a rigid precision, his eyes tracking Olivia constantly when she entered, when she exited, when she paused for half a second to yawn at his desk. He watched the way she poured water into his glass without spilling a drop, how she aligned the handle of the mug to face outward, how she confirmed appointments without ever writing them down in front of him. Each small act scraped against his nerves. Her smile never changed, shy, apologetic, carefully unassuming. It gnawed at him. Sleep came in fragments, his jaw ached from clenching. A faint tick had begun beneath his left eye, pulsing whenever he heard her footsteps outside his office. He told himself it was temporary. Pressure would crack her. It always did. On the fourth morning, he began, "Scrub the archive room floors, Olivia," he said without looking up, his voice flat. "They're filthy." "Yes, Admiral," an hour later. "Reorganize the file system, chronological order. Then color code the folders." "Yes, Admiral." He hovered over her work, breathing close enough that she could feel it, correcting margins that were already aligned, pointing out imaginary errors. He raised his voice deliberately, letting it echo down the corridor so others could hear. "This is wrong," he snapped, stabbing a finger at her port. "Do it again." Her shoulders dipped a fraction. "I'm sorry, sir," he escalated. When a typographical error appeared on a draft when he had introduced himself, he erupted. The file left his hand before he consciously decided to throw it, paper exploding across the office as it struck the wall. "You're incompetent," he shouted, his voice raw, unmodulated. "I don't know how you passed the background check, girl." The word hung in the air. Olivia knelt without hesitation. She gathered the scattered pages methodically, stacking them square against the floor before lifting them. Her breathing was steady, measured through her nose. As she bent, her blouse sleeve slid back just enough to expose skin. Mitchell's eyes locked onto it. A scar, pale and elongated, ran along the inside of her right forearm. It was not irregular, not jagged. It had clean edges, the telltale pattern of sustained friction against coarse material. Fast stroke burn. His chest tightened. He crossed the distance into steps and seized her wrist. His grip was hard, deliberate, fingers digging in as if to test bone beneath muscle. "Where did you get that?" he demanded. She looked up at him slowly. She did not recoil, did not gasp. The skin at her neck was smooth, her carotid pulse visible but unhurried, beating with an almost unsettling calm. Her eyes held his, dark and unreadable. "Cooking accident, sir," she said evenly. "The oven." The lie was clean, practiced. Mitchell's fingers tightened, his thumb pressing into the tendons along her forearm. He expected resistance, a flinch, something human. Instead, her arm felt immovable, dense, like braided cable beneath soft fabric. He shifted his grip, applying pressure the way he once had during detainee extractions, gauging reflex and compliance. She did not pull away, her gaze hardened, the warmth draining from her eyes as if a shutter had closed behind them. Her jaw set, muscles along her cheek tightening almost imperceptibly. "Let go, Admiral," she said. There was no honorific, no inflection of deference. Her voice had dropped, lower, steadier, carrying an unmistakable edge. It was not loud, but it cut through him more sharply than his own shouting had moments earlier. A warning. Mitchell released her as if burned. He took a step back, adjusting his uniform with a trembling hand, forcing his expression into something resembling control. His breathing came shallow now, quick pulls of air that never quite filled his lungs. Olivia stood, smoothing her sleeve back into place. The scar vanished. The softness returned to her posture. She handed him the stacked papers. "I'll correct it," she said quietly. "It won't happen again." She turned and left the office without another word. Mitchell remained where he was, staring at the spot she had occupied. His pulse hammered in his ears, drowning out the distant sounds of the corridor. He had what he needed now, not proof, but confirmation. The threat was real, physical, disciplined. She was not there by accident. He needed her objective, her handler, her endgame. And he needed to find it before she decided he was no longer useful. The Situation Room felt smaller than it was, the air thick with recycled oxygen and the low hum of electronics. A live feed flickered across the main screen, grainy terrain, heat signatures pulsing in white and orange. A SEAL platoon was pinned in a narrow Yemeni valley, terrain rising steeply on both sides, the geometry unforgiving. Sporadic bursts of static chewed through the audio feed, clipping voices mid-sentence. Mitchell paced behind the command table, saw less of his dress shoes scuffing the polished floor and shore, agitated arcs. Sweat darkened the fabric beneath his arms, the crisp white of his uniform losing its sharpness by the second. His left eye twitched again, faster now, as if trying to blink away the problem in front of him. "Talk to me," he snapped. "Enemy AA position on the southern ridge," the comms officer said, eyes locked on the display. "Man-portable systems, the bird can't set down without taking fire." Mitchell stopped pacing, his jaw tightened. He leaned forward, palms braced against the table, shoulders hunched as if bearing weight. The map showed limited options, steep inclines, exposed approaches, choke points etched in red. "Pull them back to the ridge," he said, voice sharp, decisive on the surface. The comms officer hesitated, his mouth opened, closed, he swallowed. "Sir, that ridge is a kill box, overlapping fields of fire. If they break cover..." "I gave an order," Mitchell roared, straightening, his fist slamming down hard enough to rattle the pens in their holders. The sound echoed, brittle and final. Inside his chest, something unraveled. He could already see the headlines, the subpoenas, the auditors tracing funding streams that were never meant to be visible. If that platoon died under his command, black tide would surface. The money, the falsified reports, the bodies buried in accounting codes. He needed them out. Any way out. The door opened quietly. Olivia entered carrying a stainless steel tray with bottled water and paper cups. She moved along the wall, eyes downcast, careful not to draw attention. The room barely registered her presence, all focus locked on the screen, where icons shifted and stalled. As she approached the table, her foot caught the edge of a chair leg, the tray tipped. Water spilled across the tactical map in a sudden cascade, droplets splashing over laminated terrain overlays and grease pencil markings. Mitchell spun. "You clumsy idiot," he shouted, the words tearing out of him raw and uncontrolled. "I'm so sorry," Olivia said quickly, her voice small. She set the tray down and grabbed napkins, blotting at the map with hurried motions. Her hands moved fast, but not randomly. As she wiped, her index finger traced a thin, deliberate line through the northern edge of the map, a dry riverbed, barely marked. Her movement slowed just enough to draw the eye. She glanced up at the comms officer, her lips parting. Wadi, no sound, just the shape of the word. The comms officer's gaze snapped to the map, his breathing hitched. He leaned in, seeing it now, the natural depression cutting through the terrain, shielded from the ridge lines, offering concealment from the AA positions. It wasn't ideal, it was narrow. But it was covered. It was survivable. "Belay that order," he shouted into the mic, fingers flying over the console. "Team 2, move north through the wadi, use the riverbed for cover. Exfil at Point Delta, repeat, Point Delta." Mitchell opened his mouth to object, then froze. His eyes darted from the screen to the map, realization dawning too late. The platoon's icons shifted, rerouting, slipping out of the red zones. Seconds stretched, then minutes. The radio crackled. A voice broke through, breathless but steady. "Command, this is Team 2, bird is in the air. We are safe, good call." The room exhaled as one. A few officers clapped shoulders, someone let out a quiet laugh of relief. Mitchell sagged against the table, nodding stiffly as eyes turned toward him. He lifted his chin, absorbing the moment, the credit settling around him like a borrowed coat. "Well done," someone said. Mitchell said nothing. He looked past them. Olivia stood back in the corner, hands folded in front of her, gaze lowered to the floor. Her posture was neutral again, unremarkable, invisible. No one thanked her. She had just outmaneuvered a 2-star Admiral without speaking a word. Mitchell felt the clock closing in on him with every controlled breath. The rescue in Yemen had bought him time, nothing more. She had preserved his men and, in doing so, tightened the noose around his own neck. Each hour she remained in his office was another line, added to whatever silent ledger she was building. He saw it now in hindsight. The way she listened without writing, the way her eyes lingered on budget codes, on routing slips, on innocuous memos that meant nothing to anyone else. She wasn't there to help him. She was there to finish him. Firing her was impossible. Paperwork alone would trigger scrutiny, and scrutiny would lead to questions he could no longer afford. Reassignment was worse. Distance gave enemies freedom. Know it, she was to disappear. It had to be decisive, contained, final. By the end of the day, the plan had taken shape with cold clarity. Physical evidence, something undeniable, the kind of proof that didn't require interpretation or intent. Classified material outside a SIF, cache, motive neatly imply. He would seed it where it would be found and let procedure do the rest. Military police didn't need context, they needed cause. Late evening settled over the building, the corridors thinning until footsteps echoed. Mitchell waited until the administrative offices went quiet, then summoned her with a clipped call. "Olivia," he said when she entered, "take this briefcase to the courier in the lobby. Urgent. It cannot wait until morning." He placed the case on the desk between them. Standard issue black, reinforced corners, combination lock already set. Inside lay the printed black-tied ledger transaction sheets, coded disbursements, casualty offsets interleaved with bundled cash, the serials deliberately unclean. Her eyes flicked to the case, then back to him. No question, no hesitation. "Yes, Admiral." She took it with both hands, posture careful, as if aware of its weight beyond the physical. As she turned toward the door, Mitchell watched her shoulders, waiting for some tell. There was none. The moment the elevator doors closed around her, he moved. He picked up the secure phone, his fingers steady now, the decision complete. "This is Rear Admiral Mitchell," he said, lowering his voice. "I'm reporting suspected espionage. My assistant is attempting to remove classifying materials from the building. She's en route to the lobby." He hung up, hand crossed to the security monitors. The camera feeds blinked into focus hallways, stairwells, the elevator descending floor by floor. His reflection stared back at him in the dark glass, mouth set in a thin line. A smile tugged at one corner despite himself. Not relief, satisfaction. The elevator reached the lobby, the door slid open. 3 MPs were already positioned near the desk, weapons slung but hands ready. They moved as one. "Halt." One of them barked. Olivia stopped mid-step. She did not argue, did not drop the case. She stood still, the briefcase hanging at her side. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted her head and looked toward the ceiling-mounted camera, straight into the lens, straight at him. There was no anger in her expression, no fear. Just a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head, the corners of her mouth tightening as if in regret. Mitchell's breath caught. The MPS took the briefcase. Fingers snapped the locks open. The lid lifted. Mitchell leaned closer to the monitor, his pulse pounding loud enough to drown out the ambient noise of the feeds. The case was empty. No documents, no catch. Just neatly stacked reams of blank printer paper, pristine and useless. The smile vanished from his face, cold spread through his chest, sharp and sudden. His left eye spasmed hard, the tick no longer subtle. His mind raced, scrambling for explanations that collapsed as quickly as they formed. Behind him, in the quiet of his office, a door latch turned, click, the sound was soft, final. Mitchell turned slowly. Mitchell spun, his heels skidding slightly on the polished floor as his body caught up to the sound. Olivia stood just inside the office, one hand on the door handle, the other turning the lock with a quiet, deliberate click. The nose landed heavier than a gunshot. The corridor beyond vanished behind solid wood. "Looking for the ledger, Marcus?" she asked. She used his first name without hesitation, without permission. The last remnants of the assistant were gone. Her shoulders were back now, squared and level, the line of her neck straight and unguarded. Her chin was lifted just enough to signal dominance, not arrogance. She crossed the room with measured steps, not rushed, not cautious. Each footfall was placed with intent, weight controlled, balance centered. Mitchell's left eye jumped violently. She stopped at the liquor cabinet, opened it, and selected a bottle without reading the label. Bourbon. She poured 2 fingers into a heavy glass, the amber liquid catching the low light, then closed the cabinet with a soft press of her palm. She turned and sat in his chair, settling into it as if it had always belonged to her. The leather creaked. "Who are you?" Mitchell managed, his voice cracking on the last word. His hand slid into the desk drawer, fingers searching for the familiar grip of his sidearm. The metal was cool under his skin, grounding him for a fraction of a second. "Don't." The word was quiet, flat. She raised the glass and took a slow sip, her eyes never leaving him. "I removed the firing pin while you were in the bathroom this morning." Mitchell's hand stopped moving, his fingers closed around nothing useful. The air in his lung stalled, burning as he held it too long. He withdrew his hand slowly, as if sudden motion might fracture what little control remained. "I'm not your assistant," she said. Her voice carried no heat, no triumph. It was precise, clinical, the tone of someone stating a verified fact, and on not internal affairs. She reached into her jacket and produced a folded credential, placing it on the desk without sliding it toward him. He did not need to read it to know it was real. "My name is Lieutenant Commander Olivia Vance, DevGru." She paused just long enough for the designation to land. "I was sent because Washington suspects a leak in the command chain." Mitchell let out a short, broken laugh. It sounded raw in the room. "You're a SEAL." His gaze flicked over her uniform again, as if seeing it for the first time. "A woman." Her eyes narrowed a fraction, not in anger but assessment. "The Navy has evolved. Admiral, you haven't." She stood, walked around the desk, and dropped a thin file in front of him. It landed with a dull thud, papers shifting inside. Mitchell's gaze followed it despite himself. "I know about the skimming," she continued. "The shell allocations, the false maintenance overruns. I know you sold the coordinates of your own men to pay off your gambling debts." Color flooded his face, climbing from his collar to his scalp. A vein stood out at his temple, pulsing hard. "You have no proof," he shouted, the words coming too fast. The briefcase was empty. She smiled then, but it never reached her eyes. "I switched the contents hours ago," she said lightly. "You telegraphed the move. You always do when you panic." She leaned forward, bracing her hands on the desk, closing the distance just enough that he could smell the bourbon on her breath. "But I'm not here to arrest you for theft, Marcus." "That's too easy." Her gaze held his, unblinking. The silence stretched, heavy and controlled, like the pause before a breach charge. Mitchell's breath scraped out of his chest, thin and uneven, as the words hung between them. The room felt smaller, the air stale, heavy with the faint chemical bite of old leather and stress sweat. His jaw tightened until the muscle jumped, a barely controlled spasm beneath thinning skin. He looked at Olivia as if trying to calculate a distance that could no longer be crossed. "What do you want?" he hissed, the sound sharp, stripped of rank or command presence. Olivia didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She remained still, shoulders square, weight balanced over the balls of her feet like someone trained to move without warning. "I want the beer," she said. "You're not the end user. You're a courier with stars on his shoulders. Someone is paying for that intelligence. Someone above you." The truth hit him physically. Mitchell's knees buckled before his mind caught up. He dropped onto the sofa, the leather creaking under his sudden weight. One hand braced against the cushion, fingers splayed, nails pale from pressure. His gaze fell to the floor, unfocused, as if the polished wood might offer a way out. Above him, the word echoed in his skull: a senator. Untouchable in public, predatory in private. The intel had moved through shell consultancies and offshore vehicles, timed perfectly with defense appropriations and classified briefings. Trades executed minutes before policy shifts. Dealings made on information never meant to leave ASCIF. Mitchell had told himself it was temporary. That he was controlling the damage, that he was still the adult in the room. If he spoke, the senator would erase him, not politically, physically. Mitchell had seen what happened to liabilities. If he stayed silent, Olivia would dismantle him piece by piece. "If I give you the name," he whispered, voice cracking despite his effort to steady it, "I go to prison for life." Olivia leaned forward. The movement was minimal, but it changed everything. The space between them collapsed. "If you don't," she said quietly, "I release the audio of you ordering your men into a kill box to clean your exposure." Mitchell's eyes snapped up. A vein pulsed at his temple. "You won't go to prison," she continued, her tone clinical, almost surgical. "You'll be tried in public. Congressional hearings, wall-to-wall coverage, and the families of those operators. Your operators will learn exactly how disposable they were." His lips parted, but no sound came out. His chest hitched once, a reflexive inhale that stalled halfway in. He tasted copper. He was trapped, but panic breeds creativity. Somewhere beneath the fear, a calculation formed. The senator had contingencies. A private extraction team, black budget, deniable, positioned for exactly this kind of breach. If Mitchell could move locations, change terrain, create a window. "Okay," he said, forcing his voice into something that resembled surrender. "I have the name. It's on a secure drive. In the safe at my house." He lifted his eyes to hers, attempting steadiness. "We have to go there." Olivia didn't answer immediately. She watched him. The slight flutter beneath his left eye, a micro-tremor he couldn't suppress. His right hand curled inward, thumb worrying the edge of his ring as if it were an anchor. He was lying, not about the drive, about the intent behind it. She knew, and she let it stand, because lies required motion. And motion exposed infrastructure. Her face revealed nothing as she straightened. No triumph, no threat, just resolve, cold and disciplined. "Lead the way, Admiral," she stepped aside, granting him the illusion of control, already mapping the next phase in her head: vehicles, routes, response times, who would surface when the board was tipped. Mitchell rose slowly, every movement careful, as if sudden action might shatter the fragile deal he thought he had just made. Behind him, Olivia followed at a measured distance, eyes locked on his spine, listening not to what he said but to everything his body couldn't hide. The government sedan rolled to a controlled stop at the edge of the estate, its engine idling for a fraction of a second before dying into the night. The house ahead loomed in disciplined symmetry: stone facade, tall windows, manicured hedges now swallowed by darkness. No exterior lights, no motion sensors tripping. The kind of darkness that wasn't accidental. Mitchell swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed once, then again. "It's in the study," he said, the words trembling despite his attempt to steady them. His fingers hovered near the door handle before closing around it too tightly, the knuckles whitening. Olivia exited the vehicle without urgency. Her eyes moved constantly, cataloging angles, blind spots, distances. The gravel under her boots made no unnecessary sound. She noted the absence of security patrols, the silence of cameras that should have been humming. Someone had already sanitized the perimeter. Inside, the grand hallway opened like a cathedral: marble floors, a sweeping staircase, portraits of men who had worn uniforms, and smiles meant for history books. The air smelled faintly of gun oil beneath expensive polish. Mitchell took 3 steps forward, then his body snapped into motion. He threw himself to the floor, palm slapping stone as his voice tore through the space. Now, the word detonated the ambush. 4 figures peeled out of the shadows with rehearsed precision, rifles up, muzzles tracking center mass. Suppressed fire erupted instantly, the crack of rounds punching into walls and columns, marble splintering into white dust. Mitchell screamed again, not command, but panic, as he scrambled away on his hands and knees, shoes skidding uselessly. "Kill her," he shrieked, spittle flecking his chin. "She knows everything." Olivia did not drop. She surged forward. Her left hand slapped the barrel of the nearest rifle offline as her right arm scissored into the gunman's elbow, leveling the joint past tolerance. Bone popped. The weapon clattered to the floor as she pivoted, dragging his collapsing body into her chest and turning him into cover. Bullets punched into his vest instead of her ribs. She felt the impacts through him, dull, final. Her knee drove up into his femoral nerve, dropping him completely, and she rolled with him as another burst shredded the air where her head had been. Glass exploded above as a chandelier disintegrated, raining shards like ice. The hallway became chaos: shouts, grunts, the concussive rhythm of close-quarters gunfire. Olivia moved through it with violent economy. A wrist trapped, twisted, or rifle stripped and slammed buff first into a face. A heel to the instep, a palm strike crushing a larynx. One mercenary fired wild as she crashed into him, her shoulder driving him into a column hard enough to spiderweb the stone. Mitchell crawled, breath ragged, heart hammering so loud he barely registered the sounds behind him. The back exit was yards away. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He listened. A scream cut short, the crash of furniture. A body hitting the floor with a sound that turned his stomach, then another, then nothing. Silence flooded the hallway, broken only by the settling debris and Mitchell's wheezing breaths. He pushed himself upright, knees shaking, dust clinging to his slacks. He brushed them off with trembling hands, forcing himself to stand tall again. Finally, he muttered, the word tasting like relief. A hand clamped onto his shoulder. It was heavy, absolute, fingers digging in with strength that ignored his flinch. Mitchell froze. His breath locked halfway in as he turned, slowly, like a man rotating toward a firing squad. Olivia stood behind him, blood traced a thin line from a cut along her cheekbone, dark against her skin. Her blouse was torn at the shoulder, fabric soaked through where a round had grazed muscle. Her chest rose and fell once controlled, barely elevated. Behind her, mercenaries lay scattered across the marble. One groaned softly, clutching a shattered arm. Another tried to move and failed, legs useless beneath him. None were reaching for weapons. Olivia's grip tightened just enough to make the point clear. Test failed. Marcus, she whispered. Morning light filtered through the narrow windows of the Pentagon hearing chamber, sterile and unforgiving. The room was filled beyond capacity. Rows of uniformed officers, legal counsel, civilian analysts, all seated with rigid posture. Rank insignia and service ribbons caught the light in sharp flashes. The air carried the faint scent of polished leather and cold coffee. Admiral Marcus Mitchell stood at the central podium in full dress uniform. His jacket was immaculate, medals aligned with surgical precision. He rested both hands on the lectern, fingers spread just enough to steady the tremor threatening to surface. His jaw was clenched, a muscle ticking near his temple as he spoke. This woman, he said, extending a rigid finger toward the empty defendant's chair, is a foreign intelligence asset. She embedded herself in my command under false pretenses. When I uncovered her activities, she attempted to assassinate me in my own residence. His voice carried the practiced confidence of decades in command. He had rehearsed every syllable. The narrative was clean. A lone rogue actor, an external threat, plausible deniability wrapped in patriotism. Along Murray's days, a tribunal of generals listened, faces carved from stone. One leaned back slightly, hands folded over his abdomen. Another made a brief notation on a legal pad, pen scratching once before stopping. No one interrupted. Mitchell took the silence as assent. The presiding general adjusted his glasses and glanced toward the empty chair. Is the accused present to answer these allegations? For half a second, nothing moved. Then the heavy oak doors at the rear of the chamber swung open with a low, deliberate groan. The sound of footsteps followed, measured, rhythmic, clack, 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 hard soles striking marble with parade ground precision. Heads turned in unison. Olivia Vance entered the room. She was not in civilian attire. She wore full navy dress blues. The uniform fit her like armor, pressed, exact, unyielding. On her chest, the ribbons told a story no affidavit could erase. The silver star caught the light first, the purple heart beneath it. And above them all, centered and unmistakable, the gold trident. The insignia of the Navy SEALs. A collective intake of breath rippled through the chamber. A low murmur followed, quickly stifled. One general straightened abruptly. Another's pen slipped from his fingers, clattering softly against the desk. At the podium, Mitchell's face drained of color. The blood retreated so fast it left his lips pale, almost gray. His mouth opened, then closed again. A bead of sweat traced a slow path from his hairline down his temple, catching briefly at the crease beside his eye. Olivia did not look at him. She walked to the center of the room, boots striking in perfect cadence, stopped exactly 3 paces from the dais, and snapped a salute so sharp it cut the air. Her expression was controlled, unreadable, her breathing steady. "Lieutenant Commander Olivia Vance reporting as ordered," she said, her voice projecting cleanly to the farthest wall. It carried command without volume, authority without strain. "I have evidence to submit regarding high treason." The word landed heavily. Treason. She turned slightly and crossed to the evidence console. Her hand did not shake as she produced a secure drive from her inner pocket and inserted it into the port. The projector hummed to life, the screen illuminated. The first image froze the room. It was not a document, it was video. Grainy night footage from a residential security system. Mitchell's home, his grand hallway, unmistakable. The timestamp glowed in the corner. The audio crackled then cleared. Mitchell's own voice filled the chamber. "Kill her." The recording played, his tone sharp, panicked. "She knows everything." On screen, his image dove out of frame as armed men surged forward. In the hearing room, no one spoke. One general's hand tightened slowly into a fist atop the desk. Another removed his glasses, pressing the bridge of his nose as if bracing against a headache that had just become permanent. At the podium, Mitchell swayed, just barely. His fingers curled into the wood, knuckles whitening as if he might tear it apart. Olivia stood motionless beside the screen, eyes forward, posture flawless. The room had already reached its verdict. The silence inside the hearing chamber pressed down like a physical weight. The projector whined softly as the final frame froze on the screen. Admiral Mitchell collapsed on the polished floor of his own home, hands raised in panic, his voice cracking as Olivia moved through the frame with controlled violence, dismantling the hit team one body at a time. The image went black. No one spoke. The presiding general rose slowly from his chair. The movement was deliberate, restrained, but his face had flushed a deep, unmistakable red. His jaw was set so tight the muscles along his neck stood out beneath his collar. He did not look at the screen again. His eyes locked onto Mitchell. "Master at arms," he said, each word clipped, measure, lethal. "Strip the accused of his rank immediately." Mitchell's mouth opened. A breath escaped, thin and useless. No sound followed. His eyes darted, searching for an ally that no longer existed. Two military police stepped forward in perfect synchronization. Their boots struck the marble once, then stopped. One gripped Mitchell's shoulder, firm but professional. The other reached for his epaulets. The ripping sound was sharp. Velcro tore. Stitching gave way. The insignia that had taken a lifetime to earn was pulled from his uniform in seconds. Mitchell let out a raw, animal sound, half protest, half disbelief as the MPS secured his wrists in steel cuffs. The click echoed unnaturally loud. He resisted then, legs flailing, heels scraping against the floor as he was hauled backward. His voice broke into incoherent shouts, rank stripped away until all that remained was fear. Cameras flashed, faces turned away. No one intervened. As he was dragged past Olivia, she turned her head. It was the first time she looked at him since entering the room. There was no triumph in her eyes, no anger, no satisfaction. Only a calm, distant appraisal, like a surgeon regarding a failed procedure. Her gaze lingered just long enough to register recognition, then softened into something colder. "You should have let me organize the files, Marcus," she said quietly. The words were not an accusation, they were a fact. The doors closed behind him with a final, resonant thud. Outside, the afternoon sun washed the Pentagon steps in clear, unfiltered light. Traffic moved steadily in the distance, indifferent to what had just ended inside. Olivia descended the stairs alone, her pace unhurried. The weight she carried was internal now, invisible. A black government SUV eased to the curb. The rear window lowered smoothly, revealing a senator in a dark suit, his expression composed but intent. His eyes flicked briefly to the building behind her, then back. "Good work, Commander," he said. "Are you ready for the next one?" Olivia paused. She removed her cover, fingers brushing the fabric once before tossing it onto the seat. She looked back at the massive structure of stone and glass, the place where careers rose and fell, where secrets fermented in silence. "Affirmative," she replied. She slid into the vehicle, the door closed. The engine pulled away from the curb, merging into the flow of the city. The Pentagon receded in the rearview mirror, carrying with it the remains of a corrupt admiral's legacy. The mission was over. Another would begin soon. If you want more stories like this, quiet professionals, hidden battles, and justice served without applause, subscribe to the channel.